All right, we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to episode 53 of the IET India Digital Conversations. Thank you all for joining today and what seems to be like a cracker of a session with an august set of industry leaders and experts who will be keeping us busy over the next 90 minutes on the topic Health for All, a Distant Dream. That comes with a question mark though. So in 1977, the World Health Assembly decided that the main social target of governments and of WHO should be the attainment by all the people of the world by the year 2000. The level of health that would permit them to lead a socially and economically productive life. This meant availability of basic primary and secondary care for all. But now, 40 years later, it seems we are still far from it. So the healthcare working group of the IT Future Tech panel brings you this episode of the IT India Digital Conversations on this hard-hitting topic, health for all, a distant dream. In this 90-minute leadership discussion, leaders from the healthcare sector will address some of these pertinent and important questions, which we'll come down to very shortly. I'm Suman Bhaumik, your host for the series, and I lead the events development and projects for the IT in India. But before we begin our session, like every time, let me just give you a little bit of a sneak peek about the future and about some exciting updates from the House of IET. Now, I don't know if you're all aware of that there's a team that brought to you our very flagship event, the IoT India Congress, over the years from 2016 to 2019. This year, we come together again and bring you a brand new tech event which you just can't miss. Today, being the 22nd of July, what a coincidence that exactly 4 months later, on the 22nd of November and the 23rd of November, we will have the IIT Future Tech Congress, which will be taking place here in Bangalore. So, born in the wake of the pandemic, with the new paradigm shift that our world was going through, the Future Tech Congress was conceptualized to help industry, academia, and government stakeholders to use tech solutions to interpret, innovate, and adapt to the emerging demands of customers, present and the future. So, from talking about how AI, 5G, and digital twin technology is all set to revolutionize the healthcare industry, to exploring the new and emerging ways that AI powered, IoT enabled factories of the future will function, to how customers function in a newly fintech developed world, and how the supply chain becomes all digital for the future. The FTC addresses the future of customer service and consumer understanding. I have a short video here which will give you a little sneak peek about this. Let me play that here. Here we go. So that was a short video of what it is and what it has to offer. You can obviously find out more about this if you go to the website, which is live now, which is very simple, just futuretechcongress.com. And if you want to know more about partnership opportunities or speaking opportunities, do write to us. Okay, now let's get down to business and introduce the amazing speaker lineup that we have for this session. Introducing our first speaker is Puneet Panthani, a global digital healthcare transformation professional with a diverse experience of almost 20 years in healthcare digital product innovation, large scale digital transformations for healthcare providers, hospitals, and public healthcare programs across global markets. He has a deep understanding of clinical workflows across healthcare spaces, combined with artificial intelligence, analytics, and techno commercial strategy to launch solutions in the global and emerging markets. He is currently the co founder and chief business and marketing officer for Crosscope, which is building digital pathology workflows and AI based clinical decision support tools to automate histology image analysis to improve the efficiency and accuracy of diagnosis with a focus on improving care for cancer patients globally. Our second speaker is Ramanathan Sithuraman, fellow architect of the Data Platform Group of Intel Corporation. Post PhD that he did in 1997 from IISc in VLSI architectures, he has been a scientist at Philips Research Labs, Netherlands, to come close to a decade and worked on video algorithms and architectures. Then in 2006, he led a startup called Silicon Hive in India, which was a spin off from Philips Research Labs that focused on domain specific processor IP business in video, imaging, and communications. Silicon Hive was later on acquired by Intel in 2011, and since then, in different business groups in Intel. For the past 5 years, he has focused on new business initiatives in the healthcare domain in India. Our third speaker is Sudarshan Sreenivasan, the Vice President of R&D India for VDX Corporation. Sudarshan manages a team of over 2,100 associates across India in supporting three major segments: medical, interventional, and life sciences. In his role, Sudarshan is responsible for leading and supporting product lifecycle management, new product development activities, complaints handling, MDR, IVDR activities across all business units. He's also responsible for driving digital transformation in R&D. He has been instrumental in building the R&D footprint in India and started with a dozen associates, or half a dozen associates rather, in 2012, and has grown the organization to its current size, focusing on delivering value across VDX with building key capabilities and infrastructure. Our fourth speaker is Suraj Rengarajan, the India CTO for Applied Materials in Bangalore. He started his career with Applied Materials way back in 1997 in Santa Clara, where he held different roles ranging in the semiconductor industry, ranging from process engineering, technology program management, and product marketing for thin film deposition and metallization for interconnects, silicides, and novel memories. He moved to India in 2007 to set up the solar group for Applied Materials in India. Later, he headed the engineering group for dielectric deposition. As the India CTO, he works with the ecosystem on disruptions driven by materials engineering. His team also explores wide areas ranging from flexible electronics, AI packaging, and manufacturing in pharma, EVs, coatings, and other inflections that materials engineering can address. And finally, coming down to our moderator, Dr. Kamala Rai, Vice President and Senior Global Program Head at Novartis. She is also an active member of the Healthcare Working Group of the IET's Future Tech Panel. At Novartis, Kamala leads a multidisciplinary team of global experts with final accountability for innovation, strategy, and development of global programs in pain, neuroscience, and ophthalmology in global drug development. Subsequent to her MD in pharmacology from AIIMS in New Delhi, and as a physician scientist, she led development efforts for radiopharmaceuticals, small molecules, and biologicals, including vaccines across a number of therapy areas, including oncology across a number of geographies. Kamala has also led many transformational efforts across medical affairs, new product planning and clinical development at Novartis and MSD India. Currently, Kamala also serves as a member of PM's Apex Council for Doctoral Research at ACRB India. Recently, Kamala completed a number of data science certification courses by IBM and Johns Hopkins, and is a Novartis digital champion. So, without any further delay and ado, I would request Kamala to take over and produce a cracker of a session with the stalwarts here in the making. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Suman. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Great. Yeah. So you kept saying cracker of a session twice. So I and now I kind of borrow that, and I promise you it's going to be a cracker of a session because I have really looked at the body of work of Puneet, Suraj, Ramanathan, and Sudarshan. So I think we are in for a crack of a session. Before I hand over the baton to Puneet and invite him to share his perspectives, what I wanted to do is also set the context. I think we've heard, that digital transformation is upon us. But let's step back a little bit and look at the big why. Why is it that we're having this conversation now? Are we too late in having this conversation? Should this have happened earlier? But nevertheless, we are here today, and let's dive a little bit into what makes a successful digital transformation. We have some great use cases, which our panelists will kind of surface, but we also have some failed digital efforts. The examples of Ford, GE, Procter and Gamble, we all know that, where billions of dollars went down because of lack of leadership. But stepping, as far as healthcare is concerned, now more than ever, I think, as Suman pointed out, the 1977 declaration that health is not just absence of disease, but also social, mental well-being. So how does digital play a part in that? I mean, we've seen the evolution of digital from 1956, I think, and then 1959 when AI was kind of machine learning was introduced, and then in 2010 was when deep learning was kind of picked up momentum. And in 1992, if I'm not mistaken, Neil Stephenson introduced the world to the new word called metaverse. And that's upon us right now. And you will hear the esteemed panelists take us through not just the terminologies, but also more importantly, the thinking. Coming back to healthcare, which is, health equity for all, health for all and health equity. I mean, we want everyone to have accessible to health. It should be affordable, it should be acceptable, and more importantly, it should be quality care. The second thing we want to do is also look at where is the spending right now. I mean, health, one of the four impact factors that Suman pointed out. But if we step back and look at the spending, it's phenomenal. We spend almost 10, 12 trillion dollars on healthcare, with government spending almost 17% of the GDP, which is US, of course, 17 to 18%. I mean, 3 is the minimum as far as I looked at the data yesterday. India is spending somewhere between 3 to 4% of the GDP on healthcare. And right now, owing to the, pandemic proportions, right? We've seen incredible changes and adoption of digital like never before. So the seismic shifts are upon us. And I just looked at the US FDA website yesterday to see how many AI or machine learning tools were available. And we have almost 343 that have been approved so far. And I think what's going on right now in the think tank, at least to the extent that I think is happening, is patient experience is finding, front and center holding in all the discussions. So without any further ado, I would really like to set the stage and invite our esteemed panelists. But I would like to begin on a leadership, the context being that, without leadership, we've seen how digital transformation fail. I mean, a BCG report, again, a very recent one, points to almost 70%. I don't know if that figure is correct, but 70% of digital transformation efforts fail because of lack of leadership. And so to set that tone, let's hear from our first panelist, our opening batsman, Puneet. Puneet, we've heard from Suman, and I've also looked at your body of work, a fantastic work as far as computational oncology and Crosscope. So can you take us through your leadership philosophy? What made you switch to being a digital champion and leading such fantastic works as far as computational oncology goes? So just take us through some of the your leadership principles that got you thus far. You're on mute, Puneet.
Thank you, Kamala, for putting this question right up to me and, putting the onus of being the opening batsman. Having said, I think we all know over this time that, healthcare is complex, if not complicated. And oncology especially probably is one of those pieces is subspecialized in the nature of complexity of the problem which we are trying to solve. And from that perspective, what led us at Crosscope and myself personally is a twofold answer. I think one, I have personally in close quarters experienced cancer directly and part of what it impacts individuals and families. put together. That's one. And secondly, I think more importantly is what it does in the long term effects if one as an individual or a community or a family has got impacted by it. Keeping, I think, these two small observations, living them personally in hand, we felt that when we started doing this work together, probably this is the area which most motivated us and makes large scale long term impacts at a societal level. And I think that made us think what would be that key piece of thought process at me at a leadership level to make this work long term. And I think for us, that's only two words. One is engage, and second is involve. I think that's the fundamental premise I think through when I'm trying to do something at a professional capacity or even at a personal capacity in making an impact for the work we are trying to do. And when I say engage, I think we all realize healthcare is a complex problem. We all need to come together. And the premise to that engagement is we need to ensure we are involving almost every stakeholder, be it providers, for example, be it be the industry, be it be the patient experience itself. So that's where engagement comes into play. But I think more importantly, the rate at which we need to evolve from this engagement is also critical in terms of this digital transformation we are talking. So, today we get these substantial experiences of various engagements from various quarters of the space where we are working, but we don't evolve at a rapid space. I think that's one of the key deliverables I think we need to inculcate at a leadership level when we are trying to bring digital transformation in this space overall from an impact standpoint. I think lastly, this is more of a personal and a professional motto for us. We strongly want to impact, and I strongly want to impact about 1 billion lives directly or indirectly as a part of the journey, what we are trying to do at Crosscope. And I cannot fathom any other way by which it can be done rather than evoking digital intervention, And I think that's one of the ways by which we could make large impacts on large scale healthcare ecosystems, irrespective of which geography they are pertinent today. But that's what I say. Engage and evolve probably is my leadership take on making an impact, whether the healthcare problem is small or it is spread across a large healthcare ecosystem altogether.
Absolutely. That's great. So what I hear is engage and evolve, but more importantly, I think centered on patient experience and various stakeholder engagements. I think that's really incredible. And I'll come back to you on those two words. But let's move to our next panelist, Suraj. Suraj, we've heard you lead applied materials, and you've really done a lot of work on the semiconductor space. And I also was looking at your body of work related to, phenomenal academic collaborations that you've been doing. I am curious to learn, how did you make the switch from being an engineer to a life science enthusiast, and more importantly, a digital enthusiast, and making digital transformations come to life? So just take us through some of your leadership experiences and your leadership philosophy to make that happen.
Thanks, Kamala. Thanks for the setup. Thanks for the topic, and thanks for the opportunity. So our company's vision is to make possible a better future. And as a technology person in this industry, what I have learned is the two big things that technology can do to create the biggest impact is doing things that impact cost and doing things at scale. So those are the two aspects that I look for with any innovation. How can this innovation impact cost, and how can you do it at scale? And sometimes they are connected. You need to do it at scale to be able to bring down the cost. So our industry, along with we have people from Intel here, TI, IBM, have been instrumental in the last 50 years since the invention of the transistor to be able to impact life in many ways through innovations in the semiconductor display and solar industry. These have brought things down to people's hands, things where we used to wear slippers and keep them outside the AC room to enter a computer. These are now in the hands of people, right? That is the impact that technology can create. Another example I'll give is of GPS. I think 20, 30 years ago, it was a sort of niche thing. When you rented a car, they would give you a small box and nobody knew how to use it. Today, you can't get your food without GPS. right? This is an impact of technology and scale. So can we do the same thing in healthcare? I think one of the things would be, can we remove the question mark in your topic, right? The health for all. Can technology be the driver that removes that question mark and makes possible? One other aspect that we should do while we are talking about cost and scale is quality. In many other industries, there is a chance to redo, you can refund, you can return. In healthcare, you cannot. So I think in this space, we need to make sure that this cost and scale comes together with quality, the clinical impact, what the patient experiences. That is something that we should be very careful about. So this is what makes this a very important topic, where I believe that technology can play a big role.
Absolutely, Suraj. Thank you. So what I took down is doing things at scale, quality, and of course, keeping an eye on the cost. And more importantly, what I loved what you said was empowering people, putting power where it matters the most. And to your question, can technology delete the question mark and make this a reality? Let's envision and let's stretch our thinking a little bit. And on that note, let me invite now Sudarshan. Sudarshan, I heard from Suman and also looked at your body of work. Phenomenal. You lead a large team. You've led a number of digital transformation efforts. And more importantly, what I particularly found fascinating is you want to give back to the society. A lot of your efforts are also community related, giving back to the society. So in all of, from digital transformation to leading large teams and giving back to the society, what leadership matters, bother you or challenge you? Or what's your guiding leadership philosophy? Just take us through some of your, leadership mantra, if you will.
Great. Thank you. First of all, thanks to all the esteemed panel, the moderator, my colleagues and friends. As I look back at my journey in the medical device industry over the last 2 decades in combination products and single-use disposable products, the one thing that I have learned through experience and that has stuck with me is that I have the greatest potential and the ability to influence and make an impact to the society. And I should not stop at the status quo. And this is one of the main driver for me to get up every morning and say, what is that I can do different? How can I make an impact to the society? And what new things I can come up with? Now, also, I operate on this principle that there is a patient at the end of everything I do every day. And the idea that the patient could be my mother, my wife, my teacher, my friend, has immensely brought a sense of urgency and discipline to how I can be a part of the solution to bring innovation to advance the world of health. Because I know that the traditional ways of advancing the world of health is slow. So we have to transform, right? And even at my company, Becton Dickenson, the sole purpose of our existence is to advance the world of health. Now, this means that I have to embrace digital transformation and not be afraid to push the envelope and explore new avenues to find solutions faster every day. The key thing is, how do you find solutions faster? Because you cannot be in the world of 60s and 70s of taking 3 days to come up with the diagnostic results, right? So that's what is driving me. And then I often, this is the mantra that I often tell my organization, is that each one of us is standing in the middle of our own acre of diamond. So we have to dream big. It's okay if you fail, fail fast, explore and succeed. And the last point that I want to share is that for digital transformation, what I have realized is that it's a cultural change and it is not a transactional event. Now, what do I mean by this, right? This is very important, where it cannot be top down. And this is where the servant leadership is very important to make this successful. And the reason I'm saying is that the movement has to be bottom up. Everybody has to embrace. And just to give you an example, if you look at the telecom industries, 15 years back, it would take us 3 months to get a phone line. Now you can get this in 30 minutes. Imagine what can be done with technology in healthcare also. So that's what excites me. So I believe digital transformation is a culture, and I want to make an impact. I'm very passionate about it. How can I make an impact? How can I improve the health of a patient today and tomorrow?
Absolutely. Fascinating you say that, Sudarshan, because right now we are undergoing an unbossed leadership experience in our company, centered on the power of being a servant leader. And cultural transformation is at the heart of that. And then the premise is organizations don't transform, but individuals do. So when individuals transform, organizations transform. So I think you hit it exactly where it matters. And I loved how you said dream big, fail fast, and more importantly, explore and succeed. And what's particularly fascinating is how you make this a very personal agenda, and this powers your purpose. So I think great. Let's stay with that, and I'll come back to you to quiz more if time permits, because digital transformation can only happen if this cultural transformation at the root of it. Data has shown us time and again, right? So on that note, I'm going to switch to our next panelist, Ramana Dengaru. We've heard from Suman, you've moved from Philips Research to Silicon Hive and then Intel, and you've led really large digital transformation efforts. More importantly, what caught my attention was you are the owner of 19 patents. Incredible. And also a number of publications, if I'm not mistaken, almost 50 or 60 odd publications in this space. So you own this space, right? So just take us through some of your leadership experiences and what drives you as a leader, especially as you own this entire digital transformation space. Just take us through some of your leadership principles.
Thank you, Kamala, and folks from IET to have me as part of this panel discussion. See, if you look at today's healthcare system, right, it's primarily focused on addressing sick care. Hence, the system gets stressed when there is an epidemic or pandemic of sort, as you have seen with COVID, right? This approach of focusing on sick care is not a scalable approach, right, to address population scale healthcare challenges. We all know that, but time immemorial, we are stuck to addressing sick care. So we need to make a change in terms of our focus and look at identifying patients early in their disease cycle, even before their onset, wherever that's possible, right? So this will help us better predict the population scale burden, disease burden, and the needed response. Because unless you have the supply, the demand cannot be, assessed. How much is the demand? You address the supply. When we talk about healthcare for all, we should realize that it is a population scale problem or challenge that needs population scale solutions. Right? For population scale challenges that potentially throws open big data, we need tools and technology that can help us get meaningful insights. These insights can help improve healthcare outcomes apart from addressing other healthcare challenges such as accessibility and affordability. In this regard, I've been driving initiatives in Intel that investigates population scale healthcare problems. These initiatives are coming up with population scale solutions, and I'll talk more on this as we go through this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramanathan. So again, you've come to a very, very important point, because today when we start listening to not just to patients, but to carers and also to the public at large, wellness has come back as a key component. It's not just a treatment, but it's moving to wellness and it's moving to preventive care. So I think what kind of caught my attention in all of your, your setting the stage is the focus on insights. I think you want to pick up a lot of field insights and work on that, and also look at how can this impact the populations at scale, right? So I think incredible. If time permits, we'll continue to probe you on that. So stay with us on that one. So now we switch gears a little bit. But before we do that, I just want the audience to kind of some key takeaways before we move to the next session, because leadership is so critical over here. We've heard Puneet talk of engage and evolve. We've heard, Suraj talk about doing things differently, but more importantly, keeping an eye on quality, cost, scale, and empowering people, putting power where it matters the most. We've heard Sudarshan talk of cultural transformation, and of course, transform at speed. And of course, from Ramanathan, we've heard how insights truly matter. So I think let's stay with these and we'll kind of process these as we go along. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I'm going to move to the topic of the day and look at some of the digital use cases and just explore the thinking that our panelists have on how some of the initiatives that they have kind of they're owning or they're undertaking, how that is transforming healthcare. Let me begin with Puneet. Puneet, can you come in here and take us through your lens? You often talk of future-proofing, technology. So take us through some of the digital models which, according to you, would truly transform healthcare. Please.
Yeah. I think, Kamala, that's a great question in the context of the conversations which we are having. But I think, even before I go to the digital models, I probably take a step back to say why we are going to speak about them a little bit. And like I mentioned in my earlier stint before, healthcare in general is complex and delivery is even much more complex. Okay? Technology and implementation definitely go hand in hand to make an impact on any healthcare system, irrespective of which geography or which part of the world we are in. Okay. Now, the need to bring innovation to meet growing pressures of the healthcare ecosystem, I think, is the critical key which we need to solve. And that's where I think technology evolution, like technologies like AI and what we are going to kind of dwell upon further as on the metaverse, will kind of collaborate and, cross pathways. But I think the other most important thing is we also need to ensure that adoption and implementation go hand in hand. Bear in mind, healthcare systems are evolving. Healthcare problem itself are evolving. We never thought a pandemic like COVID-19 would hit in and the kind of impact it has. So it's just not the healthcare systems and they realize they need to evolve. The diseases themselves are evolving. You have multiple variants of it and how we cope with them, I think, are good examples of things. And that's where I always say, you might have a great technology. And when in our learnings in the past few years, we said you have great technology, got to implement it also is a key important aspect. But I think adoption of that implementation is where we future-proof our technology and implementation for long-haul impacts. And that's where I think, open, inclusive models of healthcare delivery are, I think, a good example. Living in this part of the world and done works in other parts of the world, like the esteemed panelists. I take the reference of the NDHM model, which we are, hearing a lot in our part of the world today. I think one of the underlying currents of the NDHM model, which has been spoken of and wanting to implement, is, I think, the premise of inclusiveness and collaboration, which is extremely transparent. If you go back and look at any healthcare system today, the level of transparency at a rate what it is increasing between the stakeholders is only increasing is exponentially. And I think that's a critical aspect of any digital model which will make transformation effective on the ground. Now, today you take the example, we in one way or the other get impacted by healthcare, friends, family, people around us. But if you really look at it, how do we expect healthcare to be delivered to us today? And I think one of the great models which I strongly admire is healthcare on demand, rather than healthcare being given to you when you arrive at a particular place for a particular purpose. And I think patients are wanting that. And at the end of the day, I think, some of us did dwell upon the fact that at the end of the day, it's patient-centric. We all work towards that common purpose of delivering care to that individual who is a patient so that he or she kind of gets cured faster. And I think that's where I would say the pandemic kind of suddenly acted as a tipping point, and you will see a lot of new care delivery models. Delivery models of telehealth have been, for example, in a very long discussions for a very long time. Governments and institutions across the world have brought policies to adoption of telehealth. But if you really look at it, did it really get adopted? The technology existed. it was only evolving better, but it never got adopted. But you look at the tipping point of the pandemic and you suddenly realize, this is the place to go. And today, as a care seeker and even as a care provider, you are mentally ready to kind of accept it as a point of care of delivery for you, as an initial assessment at least. And I'm not saying that that's the only way of delivering care. The other one, which particularly also interests me, I think, is also a combination of tele and home care and these handheld devices, this ecosystem coming together, which helps us take, I think, informed decisions much before, rather than, the stressing the ecosystem and you get sick and then I'm going to kind of solve your problem. And I think the last one, I think, is again delivering care in a hybrid model. Today we know healthcare infrastructure is getting stretched out of bounds. For no matter what happens, we land up going to an hospital, and because we mentally get a checkbox done. Okay, I've been in a hospital, now I'm going to be well taken care for, or at least there's going to be somebody taken care for. But if you add this to the earlier two examples of healthcare on demand and telehealth with home care, today I think there is technology by which care can be delivered to you in a reasonable fashion, so that we can make informed decisions. Do you really need to rush to an healthcare facility right now? Of course, we are not talking trauma incidences, they are a different one. But I think from a management of impact of patients landing up in a healthcare facility, and I think that's where hybrid models plus tele plus home care and healthcare on demand, when they all converge together, we are going to see a substantial impact of how healthcare delivery is transformed. And it, again, I bring that point today, technology is existing, it will only get better. Implementation has been there, we have learned from past experiences, it's only going to improve. But I think adoption for care deliverers, which are providers, I think also is going to be critical. You come from a clinical background, adopting technology to impact clinical care, I think it's a long curve. And I think, incidences like the pandemic have kind of acted as a tipping point. And today, I think that adoption is getting much more faster, which I think brings the onus much more on industry to bring much more better technology to deliver faster care. I would say I think those are some of the models, on-demand healthcare, telehealth converging with home care, hybrid healthcare delivery models where you don't land up into healthcare facilities the moment you feel sick and just land up there, whether it is cough, cold. I think all of that is only going to make long-term sustainable impacts for economies and societies at large from a health perspective, for better growth of individuals.
Thank you, Puneet. You've given us a lot to chew on. But one thing I want to quiz you, and maybe I want to come back to you if you could think about it before I hand it to Suraj. Puneet, I particularly was surprised. I was thinking that oncology would have the maximum digital adoption, but surprisingly, oncology is the most recent digital adopter compared to other therapy areas. So compared to maybe radiology, ophthalmology, I was surprised to see that. I thought onco would be right up there. So it's more recent. So maybe I'm going to quiz you on that. Once I come back to, maybe you want to kind of, think about that.
Sure.
Suraj, if you would come in here. Suraj, you've been passionate about how AI will change the game in healthcare. You've written about it extensively. You've talked about it. You've published extensively in this space. And you've really, garnered a lot of collaborative support in the life science space. So take us through why do you think Internet of Things? I mean, now I'm hearing it's not just Internet of Things, it's intelligent Internet of Medical Things, edge intelligence, what have you. How do you think this will be the game changer? Now the 6G is going to come in 2030 or whatever, and how will this change? Can you take us through what's your impression on, let's stay with Internet of Things, and
Sure.
how will that change healthcare?
Okay, so let me answer the first question about applied materials interest in this space, right? So compared to all the other panelists, I'm sort of an outsider from a different industry looking at healthcare, and actually that gives a unique perspective. So if we look at healthcare and the opportunities for where technology and technology solutions can play a role. There is the entire gamut. The digitization, AI, ML is one aspect, but if you spread it out, right from the drug discovery, there is a huge role that AI, ML, high performance computing, combinatorial, and different technology elements can play that will result in quicker solutions. I think that is one of the biggest cost aspects of the in the healthcare spectrum today, and I believe that technology can play a big part over there. And then continuing down the chain, the drug formulation, adding new coatings, materials there gives opportunity for new solutions to evolve. One of the biggest areas where learnings from the industry 4.0 semiconductor manufacturing can be deployed is in the pharma manufacturing, the drug manufacturing, and that is an area where the it can be almost immediate. Whatever has been learned in the last 3-4 decades in semiconductor manufacturing relating to quality, cost, scale can be deployed almost immediately. And that's one area where I think efforts are happening right now to take the yield up from like about 60% to 90%, high 90s, which the semiconductor industry is able to deliver. There is also a logistics element. So if you recall right now, the RNA vaccines were not available in India because there isn't a cold chain that can hold things at whatever this minus 80 that's required. So can you make drugs that don't need that cold chain? And technology can play a role. All of these will finally impact how healthcare is delivered to the public, right? And these are all different elements that come in. The one that Puneet talked about at large, this is the one that Applied Materials is also interested. We have had conversations with Crosscope. How can imaging, high speed imaging, and the application of AI make this something that we can impact in terms of productivity to the system. The administration part also was talked about, and there are technology solutions there also, AR, VR, and things like that. I know you will get to it later in the session, and that's an aspect that definitely can improve compliance. So, in the whole healthcare gamut, there are lots of areas where learnings from other industries can play a role, and that is what we see as opportunity in this life science space where technology solutions can play a role. The second aspect is the IoT part, right? So I have a slightly, so two things I wanted to bring into this before we jump too far ahead. One is there are still gaps in how IoT is adopted today, right? And so I think one is a technology gap, and this actually goes back to one of the things I brought in my the initial response related to battery. So today, one of the biggest challenges is battery. If you, all of us have our Apple Watch and stuff like that, but in the evening we need to put it out for charge, which limits the IoT effectiveness of this device. Similarly, devices that you can, if possible, put on your body and all that, if you are able to get a long battery life, the effectiveness, the IoT effectiveness of that will be much longer. So that is one technology aspect that still needs a lot of work. The other aspect is the workflow. How do you make this unobtrusive? So finally, for people to adopt, I think Puneet pointed out a lot of technology solutions exist but are not getting adopted. How do you make it unobtrusive? To me, unobtrusive means Alexa. So it sits around you, it takes information, it processes information. If something needs to come up, it will tell you, it will give you an alert and all that. Otherwise, it's minding its own business. How do we get medical IoT to be like that, right? Something that takes signals. So glucose monitoring might be an example that gets close to that, right? It's continuously monitoring. When you need it, you make a measurement, it goes to your doctor and you get feedback. So to me, those, we need to get to solutions where we overcome technology challenges make it part of workflow, make it unobtrusive. Then we can add, I think we can open up the world to many, many things. 6G, there are so many technology solutions are available. My issue today is the workflow adoption. How do you get somebody to adopt and use it will be the biggest challenge in all these IoT plays.
Thank you. What I
There is
particularly
one more, there is a ROI element to that also, which I'm not going into, but I'm sure the first hurdle is big enough.
Sure, sure. I think what I particularly was impressed with is when you touched base on the yield factor. So I think this would really help in carbon neutrality as well. I mean, one of the other topics we are interested is in, environmental and sustainability, right? That I think digital technology, this transformation hopefully will help address that as well. And to your other topic on battery life and workflow adoption, interesting. These are technology gaps, and we hope that the convergence and the think tank will really help address some of those. Let's stay with that thought, but let's also look at the very beautiful relationship that patient physicians, of course, at times the trust is broken. We know that, but by and large, the trust factor that patients enjoy physicians meant that it was to be in a connected world. But here we are trying to use a connected system, but put a distance between the patient and the provider. So Sudarshan, can you come in here and take us through your impressions? How do you think in this proposed connected health, how will that play up to the patient-physician relationship? What do you think will happen over there?
Thank you. Last week I was sitting with my friend who's a cardiologist in the Mayo Clinic in USA and enjoying a good conversation over coffee in Madras. And I got a notification in my phone, and a friend of mine had posted a photograph of us from a get-together the previous night. And my immediate reaction was to open the Instagram and put a like and a comment. And as I was finishing up, my doctor friend said, "Excuse me, I got to attend to a patient." And I was doing, what is he doing? Sitting in Madras, attending to a patient in USA. And he did something for 2 minutes. Then he came back and he said he received this patient ECG chart and was giving the duty doctor a few instructions on the medications. Now look at the two scenario. The former is more fun, what I did, and in social life, and the latter is about saving lives, right? Same technology for both. Now, the same technology is enabling friendly updates and enabling applications to send, store, retrieve, intelligently use data. This is the new world of medicine and healthcare, I believe. Now, as we look at the IoT space, I see the IoT as an enhancing the relationship with the patient and the providers, healthcare systems, and doctors. Now, I see the relationship in two folds, right? The first is when you look at this, the provider needs to understand how the device or the treatment is working in order to build up better devices and molecules. And it enables them to react quicker. That's number one, right? Second, for the patient, it brings them proximal to the provider, as they no longer are just reacting to medicines or treatments. Rather, they get involved in the outcome by understanding their outputs, reactions, effects better. I'll give some examples of this, right? And all this is happening with a simple device like a phone in their hand, right? So I characterize the IoT relationship as an enhancer, right? Now, adoption of the digital way is largely a mindset issue. I talked about in the leadership session that it is a culture. It's also a mindset issue. So it's very important to change the mindset of the patient and the relationship enhancer, right? Now, let me give you a couple of examples between how it is changing the relationship between patients and providers. Now, if you look at chronic diseases like diabetes, pain management, and cardiovascular diseases. So diabetes, when you look at 125 years back, you had to deliver the first insulin with a simple syringe. And today we have an artificial pancreas that's enabling patients and with type 1 diabetes to lead a normal life. Now, this is without worrying to make additional 100 plus decisions in a day, which is, I believe, phenomenal. Now, the question is how rapidly this technology can be adapted and infused across the globe is the challenge. All of us are here talking about this. And also in the same area, if you look at 10 years back, when a diabetes patient used to go to their endocrinologist, they used to write the glucose readings just before they go, or they just fill it out a week before because they don't record this. So the doctor had no clue about why his A1C is high. Did the patient take the medicine? Did they not take the medicine? What is working? What is not working? Now, if you fast forward to today, when a patient takes the reading, it directly goes to the healthcare provider to inform the nurse or the doctor on how the patient is doing. And this enables them to interact immediately and guide. So when you look at a chronic disease, the compliance aspect is the paramount. And that's what is IoT changing now and helping the patients and the providers. Now, the other major other thing I see is that how the data is instantly available to a family member or a friend. And I'll tell you my personal story on this, right? I'm a type 2 diabetic. I wear a continuous glucose monitor with me all the time because I go into hypoglycemic episodes. And my data, because of the IoT power, is connected to my wife. And can you guess, through IoT, and then I get a call when I'm in Bangalore or when I'm in New York City, she calls and says, Sudarshan, your glucose is going down. Can you grab a snack? Now, this is so powerful. This is real situation. And I think that this is how IoT is changing the relationship between the provider and the patient, right? Now, the challenge is that I consider myself as fortunate. And always, every day, I wonder is that how can we get this to the millions of patients who do not have access, who cannot afford? And that's what makes me get up every day and I say, what can I innovate? What can I do? What can I personally do to bring these technologies and devices that can be in the reach of millions across the globe, right? So, and personally, when I think about India, I believe we are fortunate to have this telecommunication system that has reached almost everyone of the population. Now, I don't think we can say this about any other countries in the globe. Look what has happened with the technology 5 years back, how we used to transact with money and what we do today, right? And I believe this is a boon to India where everyone has a smartphone. And now the question is for the healthcare industry is that how do we exploit this technology to bring healthcare to every Android hand or iOS hand? To me, healthcare is all data and data is compliance. And if billion people can have a means to receive and act on it, think about it, right? And the big question is, how do we do this from the industry to enable this? So I think this is how it is changing the relationship. It's enhancing the IoT. And also at Becton Dickenson, we are all about smart connected care as a theme for our Vision 2025, and we are no longer about needles or syringes. We are about making better devices and better outcomes. That's the focus that we are focusing on. So that's the way I see that the IoT is enhancing the relationship between the patient and the providers and the healthcare.
Thank you, Sudarshan. That's a great vote of confidence. And thanks also for the vulnerability in sharing your personal example. This reminds me of Suraj's point that, you put power where it matters the most. So incredible. Thank you so much. Ramana Dengaru, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and probe some of the challenges that work face. I represent the healthcare workforce, and we are about 65 million, I think, globally. That is, providing healthcare, and by 2030, figures are to be believed. We're going to have a shortfall of 20 million healthcare workers. So the demand is huge. The demographics are shifting. Societal needs are shifting. Whatever the reason may be, there's going to be a huge shortage of workforce. So how do you think, Ramanathan, that digital can come to the rescue? And this big white space that there is, how can this really enable some of the workforce shortages that are upon us already?
Yeah. So let me start with the diseases, right? Specifically NCDs, but equally applicable for CDs. So if you look at chronic diseases like cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, cancer, diabetes, as per the latest WHO 2021, we have almost reached 70% of all deaths are due to these diseases, right? And out of these, interestingly, 1/3 is in the age group of 30 to 69, which is alarming, right? And more than 75% of these deaths are happening in low and middle income countries like India. Now, if this is the story for NCDs, I've seen it with COVID, the story isn't any different, right? So we are in this state because of the approach, as I'm, re-stressing, the focus has been on sick care, right? If we change the game, right? If what's happening today in sick care, patients come to the health facility late in the disease cycle. This means that they will stay longer in the health facility, and the cost of treatment would be much higher. We all know that. In addition, the quality of life post-treatment is not satisfactory in many cases, right? And more importantly, the stress on the health assets get even worse due to longer stay. Now, if I flip the problem and somehow I have a magic wand that I can go and screen population and identify these patients early in the disease cycle, then at least I have a visibility into what the burden is. What is the heat map of the various diseases in India, right? And accordingly, I can plan a detailed diagnosis and intervention with existing healthcare assets, as opposed to today facing a tsunami of chronic patients in later stages of the disease cycle. Right? So now the question is, do we have tools and technology that can be used for screening population at scale? The answer is a clear yes for some of the disease verticals. Of course, it can be improved, right? It can be made cheaper, it can be made better, but we already have a good starting point. I have a couple of examples I will highlight in the later part of the discussion, but I think we have a very good starting point to do population scale screening so that we have a good handle on the disease burden. Accordingly, you can scale up or down the health facilities that you have today, right? That's the way I see you can address healthcare challenge that you posed in terms of whether we have adequate resources or not. Because I think going after adding more millions of resources is not the way to go, right? Trying to understand the problem at hand, know what is the severity of the burden, where the severity exists. Is it in which particular, like cardiovascular disease, for example, is on the higher side. Then comes, diabetes, cancer, right? And other neurodegenerative diseases, aging diseases, and so on. So once you have a good heat map of various diseases, and this also you should include communicable diseases, then you get a good control mechanism. Then you can build in your inventory. You can say, these facilities are not adequate enough. I need to beef up. The policymakers need these kind of inputs. Today, we don't have it, right? And I think this is a good opportune moment where we have technology. And as I said, there's a lot that can be improved, but we have a good starting point, right? And that's, I leave it at that.
Thank you. In fact, I'm reminded of the fantastic work that the American College of Cardiology did in building, awareness around blood pressure. And the corollary, the benefit of that was we see the incidence of Alzheimer's coming down in the US, which is a great thing. Although the number of people above 65, and we know by numbers that's increasing, but at least the incidence is coming down. And maybe that's attributed to awareness around blood pressure. So, and other good news is, to your point, if reports are to be believed, 9 out of 10 Indians are going to be IoT enabled by 2030, which is a big number. So I think that's going to, maybe it's not India, sorry, it's a global number, global figure. But whatever that may be, it still is very promising. And to your point, we can't add millions, but we really need to change the way we work. And as Sudarshan points out, culturally transform to adopt digital much more at scale and with speed. So yeah, on that note, I don't know, Suman, if you could give me a cue if we have the time for another round, because we can keep going on and on. But I'm very, very curious to probe our esteemed panelists on a very important topic, the hot topic on metaverse continuum. And actually, I want to learn from them, because I think that's all around us right now, metaverse, and that's what we hear. So maybe quickly, if Puneet, if you could come in through your lens.
You can carry on.
Sorry.
You can carry on, Kamala. You can carry on. I mean, we have 10, 15 more minutes we can do.
Okay. Thank you, Suman. So Puneet, if you could come in here and take us through, if you had a crystal ball and look into it, do you think you see metaverse at the center of it, and how it is really transforming healthcare at scale that you wish to see happen?
Oh, I think this is a very interesting time in space for all of us, irrespective of industry. But I think, maybe for the sake of objectivity, if I may say, uh, from a metaverse continuum perspective, I think we all need to, I think, re-emphasize the fact it's just not one piece of technology. Okay? It's a combination of multiple technologies which are going to come and interact together to deliver one or more than one particular, I think, outcome or purpose for what they're coming together. And they could be a combination of AI, they could be virtual reality, augmented reality, even 5G, 6G coming in together. So it's like bringing the experience of physical existence and the digital experience fused together for the purpose of what they are being paid. Now this is particularly exciting because there's so much you can do. It's like if you're an artist, for example, and you're given colors, and you can make whatever you feel like. It's exactly something very similar the way I see it, at least. I think from an ability perspective, if I just take the cue of a cube, for example, a crystal ball, I can give multiple examples today, or think of how it could come together. And take this example, we all come from clinical spaces. I take the example of an OR or an OT room. I think surgeries are very, very complex, irrespective of what type they are. I think even from a skill standpoint, but also from a standpoint of the entire ecosystem there. Now imagine you brought the point up today that the healthcare force is not meeting the demand in terms of the number of people. And I think surgery is one of the key components of any healthcare delivery model. Today, we cannot train surgeons at the rate we should train them. Now, take the example if you're using metaverse, for example, to just clinically upskill surgeons, who today we do, but the rate at which we do is a very long drawn process. The time it takes for the surgeon to be given a scalpel on his or her hand and kind of drive a surgery by himself. I think that the time is very long. Now bring here metaverse and say, what, I'm going to give you a digital manifestation for a human body. And why don't you go and practice? So let's say, for example, you have MD surgeons today coming out of multiple colleges, and we have this, put on this headset, for example, and get on this virtual call. And why don't you do and practice surgery for an A-type? Okay. So I think that's one good example of how this could be kind of coming into our lives in terms of a skilling and bringing the workforce to meet the demand. The other example I can give is, the ability to put, again, bringing metaphors in the thought of how it probably can be used. Take the ability to put two locations next to each other at the same time, and having you the choice to overlook them or be in one of them in reality, which in many ways is impossible physically. Say, for example, I still go back to my earlier example of surgery. I am a surgeon. I am in an OR1 in location 1. There are two independent surgeries happening in irrespective of locations. Me and my team knowing that even I am there, though which I'm otherwise there by, for example, telepresence today, but I can physically be empowering you or, transgressing to that space gives immense confidence to the surgeon on the other ground. And also knowing that if something happens which requires my intervention, I can quickly move from this A location of OR room to B location and kind of assist him or her of that group for that outcome for which that surgery is performed. So I think it does more than two. I think it empowers the clinical team on the ground and in real time makes me a part of the surgery which is happening, which I think is great. Today, I think it sounds very, very far-fetched. And I'm sure, panelists on the ground are going to bring topics like digital twin put together where we can feed data to get real-term outcomes without actually being in that situation put together. So I think for me, again, going back to the point of how the metaverse comes in terms of in the healthcare models, I think one, we need to all understand it's a combinational technology coming together, delivering a common problem outcome, which we want to address. Two, I think you take this in terms of upskilling, you take this in terms of even, maybe if I take a minute to just add there, me being a surgeon, I have the ability to go in time and look at a surgery, how I did that, which worked better. And while I'm doing the next surgery for a similar use case, looking in real time what worked for me there while I'm doing this surgery in reality, I think putting that perspective in context together, I think is our just the opening doors of this, how this piece of combinational technology, what we're calling as metaverse continuum, is going to help us as move forward. And there are enough avenues, whether it is drug discovery, whether it is being using for going into tissues and seeing how one cell is interacting with the other put together. So I think possibilities are immense, and I think we are just beginning to explore them to bring them to real life. That's my take on how this is going to impact healthcare delivery in large scale going forward.
Thank you, Puneet. That means that as a surgeon can be at Tata Memorial and MD Anderson in Texas at the same time.
Yeah, that it's
Awesome.
happening. It's very near happening.
Awesome. Suraj, your take on metaverse?
Yeah, I think Puneet covered the full gamut of different potential use cases, and it's very exciting. Maybe I will stay closer to earth in terms of what will happen right now. I think the IET plug for the event in November brought three areas, right? The artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, things like that. So to me, I think the blockchain aspect is very underrated and something that is critical to making all this happen. In order for us to share this information, especially patient data and all that over the web, I think we need to build a strong foundation, secure foundation on how to do that. And I think blockchain will enable that, and that needs to happen to make sure that people have the confidence to do all these, and also to make sure that it is secure. That's one thing. Then I think the other one was this whole telemedicine, right? I think we all were pushed into this environment now with telehealth. I think the AR VR part of that will make that more personal. I think that's probably the first kind of thing that will happen. How do you marry AR VR with some telehealth so that you feel that you're interacting with somebody? That is something that will happen immediately. And I think a lot of the immediate applications. So I was seeing one. There is one called AccuVein where there's a projection of the vein on your skin. So I think things like that, which are much, much, much closer to home, they will impact immediately. I think let's probably look at all of those happening. I'm sure that there are many, many, many bigger, fancier things awaiting us, but we should put some things on the ground that are immediate. They show immediate ROI to the provider. They show patients that there is comfort and also some outcome based on that. So that will enable the way for all these other things to happen.
Thank you, Suraj. In fact, what excites me about metaverse and the digital twin is just imagine a scenario where I will be doing a clinical trial on the digital twin. Rest assured that, become a little more bolder in the approach. Maybe Ramanathan, Sudarshan, I'll come to you, but because I touched base on digital twin, I know that's a topic of interest, and Ramanathan is very, very passionate about sharing his perspective on digital twin. So could you just come in here and see if this is going to be a possibility anytime soon, where a digital twin will take over as a trial participant, and really, help early data readouts, and
let me give an example here. I think things make it more concrete. If you look at in the COVID times, people facing a lot of lung distress, in acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, a local mechanical overload of the lungs due to suboptimal ventilator settings is one of the major causes for high mortality. Interestingly, a German company, a startup called Ebenbild, they came up with a ventilator, system which is completely precision controlled to the patient's characteristics in terms of his lung. So they used the physics principles, took the CT scan of the patient lungs, and a lot of physics-based algorithms were applied to create a highly accurate digital twin of the human lung, which is precise for that particular patient. So what happened? The death rate went down, and they have shown statistics, and you can look it up. Now, what is interesting is this is just a physics model of the lung, right? You can imagine scenario chemistry model of the lung, the biology model of the lung, and then interplay biochemistry model, biophysics, and physicochemical, eventually leading into true digital twin of the lung, right? Now, this is just the beginning, right? And I expect more and more organs to have its digital equivalent that will help us explore healthcare solutions in the digital world, right? Having said all of this is all nice into the future, right? What one of the things that we did, which is more grounding us to where we stand today, is we took for cancer screening program, we took phone based image, right, for oral cancer screening. So this is take 5-6 pictures of the oral cavity, then you have a deep learning algorithm that applies on it to say if it's normal or abnormal. Now, based on that, we could decipher and tell the abnormal patients to go to the secondary or tertiary care for additional treatment. Now, this is a sort of, if you take, most of these cancers are like a taboo, right? Breast cancer, cervical cancer. And people in rural parts of the country, they don't want to, come and approach. And when they approach, they're probably too late in the game, in the disease cycle. So technologies that can be brought to their doorstep, portable, potentially handheld, right? A mobile phone is something that you can carry along. Colposcopy, right, is something that you can use for cervical cancer. For breast cancer, you have, infrared imaging based screening these days. There is a startup there as well. You have ultrasound, portable ultrasound. So there are numerous possibilities, even portable X-ray machines, right? Meaning handheld X-ray machines, right? Of course, they are expensive, but if the demand is high, the cost, can be brought down. So if you have these kind of technologies that can take us closer to the people where they are, right? Which relates to some other panelists mentioning how the adoption can be improved, right? I think this is the needle moving thing, I would say, to make people be aware, use technology at their doorstep, and catch these people early in their disease cycle, right? And I think this combination can help us, come up with the treatments. And, for diseases like neurodegenerative, today we know that there are, genes that are causing it, right? For Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, but we don't have any proper intervention today, right? The best thing is the genes are made up as we are born. It's not changing, right? So can we not come up with panel sequencing that is cost effective, do population scale sequencing to assess, and if we find these kind of patients, can we not change their lifestyle so that they have a better quality of life? Instead of the disease hitting them at the age of 60, maybe you push it off by another 10 years, right? By just changing the quality of life fairly early in their developmental process. So I think these are a broad set of things that one should look at. Metaverse, yes, that's the future. We need to go towards, and I think there are elementary building blocks that are getting done in the case of digital twin. And I think we should move forward in that direction, but at the same time, not to lose the connect to the ground zero, right? Because a lot of problems need to be solved today in the space of non-communicable diseases, and people in the rural part of the country are not having any access to any of these facilities, what you can expect in a place like city like Bangalore or Hyderabad, right? So I think we should balance between the two, right? Between what is imminent, immediate, and versus what is future. And I think if we do that, really well, probably, we can address this healthcare challenge.
Thank you, Ramanathan. In fact, two use cases come to my mind. One is how technology is able to better pick up leprosy, even better than a dermatologist, an early image, say using a smartphone, for example. The other thing is diabetic retinopathy, because not every ophthalmology center has the capability, or every primary care physician, for example, have the capability to pick up a grade 1 DR or whatever, right? So I think those two use cases are already right now, being deployed. So
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
Yeah, you have fundus image cameras which are portable that can be used for DR, AMD, a lot of eye-related disorders. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. So there's to your healthcare spending. We've seen millions being spent. Even in India, it's almost 3 to 4%, which is big for the size of our economy, and also the US. But the US data shows almost 25%. Again, I'm a little surprised with that number. 25% of that spend is wasted. So, and there's a lot of friction in delivery of care. So, do you think that metaverse, the future of all of this, XR, VR, all of that, will it eliminate friction in the system? Will it reduce waste? What are your quick thoughts on metaverse? How will that come in and kind of help save precious resources?
Yeah, so I want to pick up where Suraj talked about, right? Return on investment. I think immediate metaverse is big, as Ramanathan talked about. So I think I'll give you a couple of examples where it can eliminate a lot of inefficiencies and improve this wastage. Exactly to your question, right? Take the example of a hospital process, right? The hospital process is the most cumbersome with workflows and decision trees that are not consistent, even within the clinic, within the same hospital. Now imagine across the hospitals, right? Now imagine we could create a digital copy of the workflows and decision trees and apply machine learning and analytics. Now, when we do this, can you imagine hundreds of thousands or even millions of scenarios could be generated to identify the pain points? And the beauty is that we can test the solutions before it can be deployed. I think even Puneet even talked about in the surgical workflow, right? Those things can be tested and then identify the risks before we deploy them. And I think that's value from metaverse that you can immediately see, and it cannot be done by human brain because it is so complex. So that's one thing I see where it can bring down the efficiency immediately. And going back to the earlier point that return on investment quickly. The other key thing I think there is a big benefit is that this virtual reality and augmented reality are well established in the gaming industry and widely used. Now imagine that these technologies are used in the medical education system. I'm very passionate about this. Rather than teaching with a slide or a whiteboard or a textbook, can you imagine the image of a human body? You can enter the human body with AR, VR, and literally enter every organ to provide a comprehensive teaching session. So I think I see, these are the two examples. This is how I see it's going to bring efficiency, in terms of immediately going back to Suraj's point, return on investment immediately. And then don't get caught up in this big blue ocean that metaverse, right? And then Puneet talked about clinical workflow. Immediately we can implement this, right? So that's my take on that briefly.
Thank you, Sudarshan. In fact, you've opened up a lot of open questions. One being, what are the other challenges? What are the limitations? But I guess time is short, and we must give our audience the opportunity to interact with you. So, Suman, if you could come in here and guide us with the flow of questions. I guess here's your opportunity to really interact with the eminent panelists over here who've been there, done that. They've transformed digitally their ecosystem. So I guess anyone can just either raise their hand or put it on the chat, and we will direct it.
Yes, I think it was. These are. I always keep on saying that these are those kind of sessions where you just want the conversation to continue and not end because it's so engaging and so enriching. I think it has been pretty holistic in nature. I just see one question here from Arjun asking about. I'll just put it on the stage so it's visible to everyone. Uh, Arjun has asked, along the lines of healthcare on demand and better healthcare delivery, how do you think the upcoming days will be in producing and adopting lab on chip in medical diagnostics?
Puneet, you want to take that one, or Suraj?
Yeah, let me
Suraj.
take a first shot, and then I'm
Okay.
sure others will have better answers. So to me, this is a toolbox item, right? Lab on a chip is a tool in the toolbox. And not all tools in the toolbox apply everywhere. So there are definitely cases where this will impact, and it's being used today also. The two things is it the right place to use it? Is it the right cost structure and all that, and does it give the right kind of results? So that is an assessment that only the medical professional plus the healthcare provider combination can make. Technology can enable all these solutions. I don't lab on a chip can be enabled very easily. The all the technologies exist today to make that happen. The question is where to apply, when to apply, how to apply, and at what cost. And that is a question that we will need to address.
Puneet, you want to take a stab at it?
No, I think Suraj just nailed it. I think the fact is this technology exists today already in one or the other way. It does exist for a particular use case, maybe more than a few particular use cases. And of course, there can be a point from the gentleman who asked the question that does this exist for all pieces today? Obviously, answer is no. But it's going to get there. But I think from a pathway standpoint, technology does exist. Very rightly Suraj pointing out, at what cost you can get a technology, but if it is not adaptable on the ground, then it's not the reality what we want to take this technology to. I think we said that, like for example, handheld x-rays, they're expensive. They do exist, but we can't get them on the ground. But I think again, that's the question of evolution. I think it's always technology coming in, clinicians coming together, bringing it together to reality, and that's how the progression of technology to adoption on ground happens. And when there are volumes, I think cost obviously will come down. It's a function of time to volume, which it will bring that cost together down, and which obviously increases adoption. So I think it's a tool. It does exist today. It's probably, I think, maturing at a faster rate than it was the last few years back. And it is going to expand its horizon in terms of where all it can be used. And in this journey, I think the adoption and cost is the adoption going up, cost will come down. All that macroeconomics will start flowing up to bring that, lab to a chip in reality. I think, from an industry standpoint, I think we largely have all those stakeholders who can say, Suraj saying that, I bring in chip manufacturing. From a drug standpoint assessment, some of us can bring value from that standpoint. So I think this is happening in reality today.
And if I can just add one thing, Kamala, take the example of this COVID, right? This antigen test. We never had this. And look at this, within a period of 8 months, we have about 20 manufacturers. Now you can test instantly within 5 minutes, we have this. So I think it is the need that is going to drive it. Who thought that we could produce a vaccine in 12 months?
Absolutely.
Right? It is there. It is there. It is just that there has to be a necessity. There has to be, it has to come to a critical point. So that's my take on it.
No, great. Of course, it's a need, and more importantly, also strong beliefs, right? So yeah, absolutely. So Ramanathan, do you have anything? We have 5 minutes left. I don't know if we want to start closing or we have time for another question, Suman.
Yeah, I don't think there are any more questions. If anybody would want to, ask the speakers anything personally.
I had one thing which I would like to ask people, right? Very open question. With all this AI, ML and improved productivity, right? What can be done with that, right? Let's assume we deploy all this, right? You are going to free up time, right? What is the best use of that? How do we then take that time that's available because of this improved productivity and then do what this session is trying to address? How do we make healthcare available for all? Right? That, I think that is a good point that we can think about, right? What will people do with this extra time available from the productivity that this will generate?
Yeah, Suraj, I look at it from my I'll talk from a personal, my organization perspective is that I think that if you release time using these technologies, I think you can put more time on innovation, innovate more, innovate the next best thing, right? So That's the way I look at it, Suraj. From an organizational perspective, how I can push this AI and ML and metaverse so that I free up Sudarshan's time so that he can worry about the next best syringe, not about how to fix a problem in a supply chain in a syringe. I want to. So like that, I think that's my thinking, Suraj. I mean, I may not be very broad, but that's the way I'm looking at it. How to.
I agree there. Recently with the COVID, right? AI has come in handy. People earlier who used to be reluctant to use AI technology, they instantly started using them because the enormous amount of patient caseloads that they need to handle, it was over and above what a radiologist or a pathologist could handle. So if AI came in and assisted and brought down 5 minutes reading to under a minute, or 30 minutes reading into under a few minutes, these are things where definitely it came in handy. And I think there is also a large part, if you look at what NHS did with the use of AI, they cleverly asked the AI folks to focus on things where automation can remove laborious work of the specialist. I think we should be careful in introducing AI where we start to question the credibility of different experts. Instead, focus on tasks which are laborious. And just to give an example, EEG, right? For a patient under a sleep study, it takes about 4 or 5 hours to annotate a data because it's an 8-hour data, right? And AI does it in 2 minutes, right? Now, this is where I think where it's extremely laborious, look at ways to use technology to reduce the time and make it handy for the experts to review. Ultimately, they have to review, right? Meaning AI cannot just deliver reports under whichever jurisdiction or geography you come from. So you need to deliver reports in a shorter period of time, and this de-stresses the healthcare setup. And I think this is where we need to head with the technology.
And Suraj, from my side, I think it's very obvious that although there are almost more than 10,000 diseases, we have treatments for only 500. So that extra time I would use to kind of, address the other unmet needs. There's a huge white space there. So, so I would do
So,
that.
Kamala,
I think
Kamala, we have Ravi with us here, and before we summarize the session, or before you summarize the session, rather, as the audience knows, Ravi Ramaswamy is he's been leading our healthcare initiatives and the healthcare technology group under the Future Tech panel, and he's helped us curate this session and invite all of you along with the other members of the panel. So, Ravi, you had a question, so please go ahead.
Thank you for Suman for bringing me in. I think true to what you said, it was a kick-out conference, a fantastic conference where we had the leaders come and share their perspectives. And I have only one ask from all of you guys. The very reason that all of you all was brought together, I have been sort of evangelizing affordable healthcare and decentralized care for the last 25 years. And I think we are nowhere even close to where we want to be. And I really look forward to you guys coming together and driving the next winds of change so that we are really able to take healthcare, make it affordable, bring in a technology that is needed to sort of drive outcomes and help achieve the quadruple aim that all of us have been striving for, which is basically positive outcomes, enhanced customer experience, enhanced patient experience, and lower cost of care. I think I would possibly want all of us to collaborate and then see how the next 10 years shape up for us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ravi, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you. Kamala, if you would like to just summarize the entire thing for us.
Yeah, I think we are run out of time, but I would use just 2 words. We have envisioned healthcare differently. And thanks to this digital conversation, we need to keep this conversation going, because I certainly walk away richer today. And I hope our audience did. Thanks to the esteemed panelists' rich insights, I have picked up a number of notes. I'll summarize it and send it to Suman. And in the interest of time, as I said, I have to keep it short. But I really thank Puneet, Ramanathan, Sudarshan, and Suraj for really enriching this. And Suman, of course, and to the entire IET team, to Meena as well. So yeah, let's keep this going. I hope, Suman, this was what you had in mind when when you put it together, and we've checked all the boxes and maybe more than that. But we'll come back together for more. I think this has left substantial room to really grow this into something more really substantial. So on that note, let's close. Thanks to all the audience for joining in, for signing up on a Friday afternoon, and have a great weekend. And bye for now.
Yeah, thanks, Kamala, for the structure. I think it helped.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Kamala,
Kamala.
thank you so much. Wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your
Thank you to the lovely audience.
all.
We've had people from
Thanks, Meena. Thanks, Suman.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Take care, guys.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.